live. So welcome everybody to yet another live interview today with Become a Fearless Father. And I have the pleasure to be accompanied by Jason Webb. Jason, thank you so much for being on. Before we get into your origin story, brother, because I know you share with us who you are, I have a question for you. And I'm going to explain to you why I have a question for you right away, man. Because, I'll be checking you out. I'll follow you on your podcast as well. It's absolutely great. And this morning, I'm that's a lie. Just now, what was it? 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes, maybe 30. So I checked out your Facebook and you came out with your 9th podcast and it was all about bullies, which we're going to talk about a little afterwards. And we're going to go a little bit into kids, but it was also about dealing with haters and making sure your mindset right, if I understood that correctly. That's the first thing I want to talk about, man. How do you handle critics? Because at one point, any one of us dadpreneurs is definitely going to have to deal with that. Better yet, if you're not, then something's wrong. You're not doing something right.
What's that?
So please share what you shared in the podcast, because I'm dying to hear how you handled that kind of critic, right? That kind of hater.
Yeah. So as I said on my podcast, it was one of those things where I feel like if you're not necessarily living authentically, like if you're not necessarily getting up every morning and doing what you truly believe to your core is what you should be doing and what you want to be doing, but then also is going to help people. And I'll give as an aside, I mentioned my daughter at the end of that episode, but as an aside, we'll be walking around the neighborhood right now with my daughter, who's now 6. She was 5 at the time. We're walking around and I'll say to her, she'll say, "Daddy, that's a really nice lawn," or "Daddy, that's a really nice wall that you have, that they have. Like, I know you really like that wall, or that house is beautiful," because she knows I'm big on real estate. And I'll say to her, I say, "Yeah, Jada, that cost a lot of money." I said, how do you think that they made that money? And she's had this answer probably for at least the last 2 years of her life, maybe even more, because I've drilled it into her, which is her answer from now on is they've helped a lot of people, right? Like that's just her default. Even sometimes, and I'm not even thinking about that. Like I'm thinking of more tactically, like, what do you think they're doing? Like maybe they're an internet marketer or something. She's like, no, they help more people. And so I tell her, like when Daddy goes to, when Daddy doesn't go to work, right? And this has been the case for a long time. Daddy doesn't go to work. Daddy goes to help people, because when he's helped enough people, then they'll help you, right? And so and you can have anything you want in life. That's what I say. That's an old Zig Ziglar quote. Help enough people to get what they want, you can have anything you want, right? And so going back to the person that essentially called me, I don't know if you heard this specifically, but they called me a scammer, right? They got an email from me, or several emails from me through the automation that I have, and she said I was a scammer. And the perspective that I had immediately was that it wasn't necessarily something that was an indictment necessarily on my character. I looked at it like there has to be something, almost from an empathic perspective, which is that almost has to be something wrong with the person that's sending me that email. In other words, there's something missing with them that they just haven't been able to figure out. They haven't been able to solve, and it's more about that person than it is about me. And so the bottom line is that if you're living authentically and you really feel like whatever it is that you're doing, that your first sort of North Star, the thing that you want to do the most, is to help people, then the bullies and the critics and those types of things don't deserve our energy, and they don't necessarily deserve that noise, because or for you to make noise about it, because it's really about who you are inside. And that's just really, really important, I think, for us as entrepreneurs and people that are trying to change the world every day are doing, and certainly as parents. And then certainly we need to be able to convey that to our children every day as well.
Yep. Absolutely, man. Love it, brother. Yeah, that's a great explanation. And yeah, it's so true, man. I remember the first time, like a long, long time ago, when I was doing my other business, and I got such an email, man, I was out for like days. Right. It was hard to deal with, because I'm sitting here like, dude, I'm doing all these fantastic things, sharing all these wonderful things. And then really you're badgering me for that? It's like, but now, that was great.
That person, all they had to do, I think, is just listen to my podcast, and they would say, this person's not a scammer. That's all they had to do. But they didn't, and that was one of the emails. Click, listen to my podcast about blah, 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 blah. And they just didn't do it. So I can't, what are you going to do?
Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. And let me share this real quick. It's in the comment section for the people that are watching this. This is the link to Jason's podcast, right? So you can check out all his episodes that he came out with so far. I've listened so far to 3, and definitely high value. So I highly recommend you guys listen to it. I even left a review. So,
Awesome. Thank you. Awesome.
so yeah, man, that's what it's all about, right? We got to help each other out, but especially I don't like to leave reviews when it's not true, right? If I feel like this is not good, then I'll just tell you, like, Jason, man, maybe you should do this or this or this. If I feel like, damn, this is valuable, man, I got to share it and letting people know, right? It will help you. But most of all, as you said, man, we're here to help people, right? So me leaving a review helps you a little bit, but will help the other person a lot because they will stumble faster into your podcast, right? So that's the deal. I love it, man. So before we go any further, Jason, share with me your background story, right? Because we're very interested in knowing you a little bit better as well. And most of all, what's very important for me, you already mentioned you got a 6-year-old daughter, but share a little bit of your family setup as well.
Yeah. So I'll start with the story, my background story, because it'll sort of feed into the family story, right? And so I guess the condensed story is that growing up, I was an athlete. I wanted to play sports and didn't really necessarily want to go to work for someone else. I always felt that people that were working for other people, looking just at just how hard my mother worked when she was when I was little, and my father working and that type of thing, and just people around me. I just felt like it was just sort of not the way that I wanted to sort of be and wanted to live. And so when I got out of college and sort of moved through college and realized that I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, I wanted to be able to create a life for myself so that I could do a lot of the things that I do now, which is to, drop my daughter off at school in the morning, pick her up in the afternoon. Same thing with my son, to be able to have the kind of lifestyle and design flexibility where I'm able to make an income, have a nice little living, but at the same time, not at the detriment of my family. And so I've been a recruiter or a headhunter now for the last 13 years or so. And essentially it's my company. I help people find salespeople at technology companies. And what's nice about that is that, the income is really good. You can make a lot of money. But the challenge is that it's not scalable. It's not predictable. I don't know if, for instance, I just had a candidate start today at a particular company, but I don't know if that particular person maybe not accept the job, or maybe he won't get an offer from a company, or there's so many different things that can come up in the recruitment process that will prevent me from being successful and from making that money. Now, obviously, I've been doing it long enough where those risk factors have been mitigated, but still at the same time, you just never really know. So I started looking around several years ago for a scalable entity. I said, what could I do to be able to, if I were able to create something once and sell it to, as many people as possible? Like what could that one thing be? And I remember listening to a podcast by the name of Mixergy, Mixergy. Gentleman by the name of Andrew Warner is the host. And I heard him interviewing a gentleman who was really successful selling information online, to the point where this guy ended up making $300,000 in just a couple of days, just based on his email list. And I said, holy crap, that's got to be, that's amazing. And even though, for me, I didn't necessarily need to make $300,000 in a day, but what I needed to make sure of is that, when I'm putting my daughter to bed every night, when I'm putting my son to bed every night, and I'm sitting there just lying, just looking at them as they fall asleep, and I start thinking about how just sort of their world is right now, and how integral the success that I have plays a role in that. And so it's making sure that they simply have a comfortable bed to sleep in, a roof over their head, food in their belly, all of those things, and just the magnitude of and the weight that I would feel if that started to go away, right? And I feel that weight all the time. And I said, all right, I need to find something else for just in case. And I think that the online marketing and sort of and selling information or something online, the way that guy did on the podcast, was something that I wanted to do. So I brainstormed for a while and then created this course called Headhunting from Home, which essentially is teaching people how to sell, how to start and grow their own sales recruitment business the way I have. But the problem was that I didn't know how to market it, didn't know how to sell it, didn't know how to follow up, all that stuff, right? And so I had this course that I put hours and hours and hours and hours of work into. I'm talking in this very office for about 30 days or so, and really poured everything I possibly could into everything I knew about recruiting. And then what happened is as a result, because I didn't know what I was doing, I started hiring. I went back to sort of figuring out what is everybody else doing. What's that person that's selling the information doing? All these people that I were on email lists about. So these guys do such a good job of following up. And I end up, clicking on whatever it is that's in their emails, and I end up buying that stuff. And I said, how are they doing this? And I immediately thought, like, they probably have to have copywriters. Like, I can't imagine this guy, Ryan Dice is his name. I can't imagine that, like, he's sitting at his computer every day, sitting there writing me emails or whatever, every other day writing email. I'm like, and besides, even if it was manual, they probably had a copywriter. So I said, all right, I'm making enough money where I can hire a copywriter to do all this stuff. So I ended up hiring 3 copywriters, and that's sort of where I had this aha moment for my product now, Follow Up Fuel, where it's like, hold on, if I'm selling this course and I'm completely lost in terms of how to actually market this thing and how to follow up with people properly, I can build my email list until the cows come home. I can spend money on Facebook ads and all this other stuff and get these leads in. But if I don't know how, if they don't buy immediately, how am I going to follow up with them? And so I hired these copywriters. I'm like, do me a favor. I'm like, I want you to create an email sequence for every scenario possible that somebody like me who's trying to sell a course online or information online would want, right? So they welcome sequences and re-engagement sequences, all this other stuff into Follow Up Fuel, and that's what it is. And so my whole goal behind it is to transition from being a recruiter where you get paid when the candidate is hired and when it's made, which may or may not happen, to something else where it's like, okay, I'm going to sell this thing, Follow Up Fuel, to 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people, and every time that they come to the website and put in their their credit card information, I'm going to get paid, and then I'll be in a better situation for my family, I feel like, in the long run.
Nice, man. I like that. So real quick, man, a daughter of 6. Your son's how old?
He'll be 4 tomorrow, actually. How about that?
4 years tomorrow. Congrats, man. Congrats.
He'll be 4 tomorrow.
That's awesome. And I'm married because I saw some pictures. How long already?
So we've been together for 19 years. We met at work way back, 19 years ago. And we've been married for, it'll be, 2019? 8 years next month.
8 years next month.
Yep. So I was a slow developer. That was a long courtship. I made a wait, and frankly, it has to do with everything that I just mentioned, right? Because I wanted to make sure that I was buying and selling houses. I was taking risk after risk after risk, just trying to figure out my place in the world and what I wanted to do. And one thing that I knew for sure, I learned at some point that 95% of marriages or arguments, I think it is, or about money, or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
In marriages, and I said, all right, you know what? I want to make sure that I'm eliminating that. If I'm going to get married, that can't be an issue, right? It can't be an issue. And if I'm going to go down because my real estate, let's say, for instance, I have a foreclosure or, some sort of crazy thing happens, I don't want to take anybody down with me, right? And so I got, it took us a while. It took me a while to sort of say, all right, you know what? Like, now I feel like I know where I'm going. Like, I'm stable with this. Like, let's get married. So that's why it took 10 years before we actually tied the knot.
Hey, man, people that never get married and still happy, right? So
yeah, that's right. Of course.
Well, it's how everybody looks at it, but I'm married and we'll be married 8 years right after that month of yours.
Oh,
so that's pretty cool. Yeah. And I got a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, so we're pretty cool, bro.
That is crazy, man. That is crazy.
So how do we pick him? So let's talk about this, because you start, that's how I met, right? You started in this podcasting world, stepping in. Share a little bit with the people, man. Why did you choose podcasting to be your way of sharing your insights and experience and knowledge with your ideal clients?
Yeah, it's a great question. I knew that I went through a course recently. I'm not sure have you gone through the OFA challenge at all yet?
Yeah, I did the first one.
Yeah. Okay. So I went through that course, and I always knew that a platform for anything, whether it's blogging, YouTube channel, podcast, anything, was beneficial, but it didn't necessarily hit me until I went through that course, the OFA challenge, and not only just from hearing it from them, but just I interviewed somebody by the name of Lindsay Anderson, who wrote a book, actually found her on Amazon, called The Click Technique, and she had pounded it into me, and then somebody else, an affiliate marketer by the name of Alex S. Elliott, had mentioned this as well, which is that you have to have some sort of a platform for you to be heard. Because if all else fails, and this is what I was saying earlier about the person who called me a scam artist, is that when all else fails, they can at least see or hear or understand a little bit more about you outside of the context of this web page or this funnel. And so because I'm a horrible typer, because I don't know, which is why I hired copywriters, frankly, to write Follow Up Fuel as well, is that I don't know how strong of a writer I am in terms of really trying to have one coherent message from beginning to end, one thing I can do, as you can tell, is talk, right? And so I wanted to a platform where it was going to be very comfortable, very easy for me to just turn on a microphone like this one right here, just turn on this microphone and get ready to go. And so part of that too was, okay, well, how am I going to be able to continue to be authentic, right? I'll say that word a lot, but to be authentic and to continue to produce content that's valuable and that I think people can get a lot out of. And what I didn't want to necessarily be is somebody that's going to come on and necessarily talk at people and tell them like, this is what you should do based on something that I learned 5 minutes ago in the OFA challenge, let's just say, right? I just felt uncomfortable with that. And so I got to the point where I said, I was okay, and Russell Brunson mentions this as well in terms of an attractive character. I was okay with being a reporter and reporting not necessarily on what other people are doing, but what I'm doing every day. As I try to grow my business and just be as transparent as possible about what's happening with Follow Up Fuel. So, the first episode was just essentially about the backstory of Follow Up Fuel and really sort of bringing people on that journey. But then I added, and you alluded to this a little when we first started talking, I added a little, at first it was once a week where I was just going to start talking specifically about the journey of Follow Up Fuel. But then as I got more comfortable and just more excited about doing the podcast, I said, all right, you know what? Why don't I add a couple of other elements to the show so I can publish more and still feel like I'm in my own element and not necessarily talking at people, but just sort of sharing my stories and my journey. So on Mondays, I have Mindset Monday, where I talk about just exactly that. That's what that whole thing about that you heard yesterday was about self-esteem and sort of how to handle bullies and critics. On Wednesdays, I have a feature called Walk Away Wednesday, which is essentially going to be me sharing my ideas and thoughts about, if you are somebody that's stuck in a rut, maybe you're at work that you don't really like, maybe you're in a position where you're running your own business, but you're not necessarily excited and passionate about it. Like, what is something that you can do by the end of my podcast where you can take away where it's like, okay, if I did this every day for a year, if I did this every day for 6 months or whatever, if I sort of went on this path that Jay is suggesting to me, then maybe I'll be able to walk away from this thing that I'm doing now towards something else, right? So that's Walk Away Wednesday. And then Friday is about Follow Up Fuel Friday. So I use reserved Follow Up Fridays for sort of giving people an update as far as what's going on with Follow Up Fuel, some of the things that I've been learning and some of the things that I've been implementing. And then the successes and failures that I've had, and just hopefully they can learn from all that as well,
Exactly. Love it, man. That's great. And so you've done several, right? Can you explain, because a lot of people, and we've talked about this, or we've seen conversations about this in the podcasting group that we're in, right? Like, ooh, it's so scary, etc. When you started, can you share a little bit of like, now you're way ahead, right? You've done several. How was the first feeling, man, when you put that mic and you're like, okay, I'm going to start. So people can know that it's not, people sometimes think like when they see me now, right, in comparison to the first interview I did, it's like, dude, you're so good. I'm like, dude, this is my 80th plus interview live, right? You want to see my first one? You want to see my second one? You want to see the one I did with Rachel Peterson? Dude, I was sweating. I was nervous as hell, and I told her I'm nervous as hell. So that was cool that she carried that interview, and I had more interviews like that the other person had to carry me, so to say, right? So I'm just wondering, man, share a little bit of your experience as a first, the first time you went live, and you started your podcast.
Well, so it's interesting because it was never live. It was like this. It was always just sort of recorded, right? So to me, I had a little bit of a cushion there, I felt, even though I had done some Facebook Lives before in my Facebook group and those type of things, but it was never anything where I needed to carry a conversation, let's just say, for instance. It was just sort of like quick in and out, like one of those types of things, right? And I had done some interview style stuff before in the past for my recruiting business, but the one thing about the podcast for me was that it is recorded, right? So it's not live. But then because, here's the thing, and I've gotten this advice from that woman that I mentioned, Lindsay Anderson. I also heard Stephen Larson mention this too as well in the OFA challenge, and a couple of other people as well, is to just sort of, whatever you're recording, even though you're recording it, don't just don't leave it there in the archives. Don't delete it. Don't do anything like that. Go for it. You're turning on that mic. You're going to go for it. And it's the only way where you're going to improve. Because here's the reality of it, right? Like, I've done sales videos and those types of things. And I mentioned like the headhunting from home books that I mentioned. I remember doing those sales videos, and because like I cannot read out loud. Like it's just something about. Although now that I have kids and I'm reading books to them every night, and I've gotten better. Like I had to recently read to my son's class actually for his birthday, like because his birthday was after the end of the school year. They moved it up. And so I went there and read The Little Engine That Could. And I'm glad he picked that book because I knew it so well. But generally speaking, like I'm not good at like reading off of a teleprompter and those types of things. And I really have to just sort of do everything extemporaneously, right? Like just off the top of my head. And so I figured that as long as I was starting to sort of get the words out there and just start talking, that I would be okay with that. And I would live with the fact that I wasn't going to stop and edit and stop and edit the way that I did, by the way, with the Headhunter from Home course, because it would take me forever. That's why I was locked in this office for that 30 days, because a lot of that stuff was just trying to get everything so perfect. And I was talking to a friend recently about it who was critiquing the podcast, and I said, I cannot record multiple times because I have so many other things to do during the day. I never leave my house. I never leave the office. I've got to just do it. And so my advice I guess my own perspective and just advice to people is to just hit the record button and just start and trust the process, right? Trust the process that the more that you do it, the more comfortable you're going to get and the better that you do. Like for me, episode number 2, if anybody goes back and listens to it, like I feel like my first episode was better because it was something that I had just sort of gone on in my rehearsed in my mind over again. You know, that story that I tell about starting Follow Up Fuel that I just sort of talked to you a little bit about. But the second episode, I was a little bit reticent because it was a story about something that it was a huge setback, and even now as I'm mentioning it, it's one of those things where I don't necessarily want to like dwell on necessarily because of the people that were involved, and it was just quite painful. And I think you could probably hear that my reticence a little bit during that interview, and I was low energy, and it was just something that just wasn't right. But I didn't delete it. I just sort of put it out there and let it be. And then I learned from that, right? Even I think on podcast episode 3, I don't know if you heard this one, but it was called Learn, Act, Iterate, and Duplicate, an acronym for LATE, right? And it's about sort of how to do everything now, right? So record the podcast, right? Like I learned how to do a podcast. I just sort of sent a friend an email who has a podcast, said, how do I do this? What are the tools that I need? He responded to me over a weekend. Immediately, as soon as I got it, I said, all right, now I'm going to do it. I just learned, so now I'm going to act. And I don't wait. After I learn something, I just go ahead and put it into play. And then it's time to iterate, right? So any mistakes that I make, anything like that, I'm not going to just necessarily shut off the mic or shut everything down or, delete the recording or anything like that. I'm going to go forward, but I'm just going to learn from what I did. So listen to the last podcast, pick up on the things that I want to do differently and fix those. And then once you fix them, then start duplicating. So everything that you feel like you're doing right, then start duplicating those things. And that's the way that I've done it. And I think the more that you do it, your voice starts to come up more. You start to get, it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy where the more that you do, the more that you do, right? The more that you get, the more results that you get. And it's worked. I mean, this is the perfect example where, had I not started the podcast, I never would have been in the podcasting group that we're in, Podcasting 101. And I never would have met you,
Yeah. True that. Yeah, we can't have that.
Right.
Man, that was some great gold nuggets. I really appreciate you sharing that. And yeah, absolutely. It's just go in and that's sometimes I think like I'm cheating because I can't cut. Right? I'm live. I can't just say, okay, cut.
Right.
I can do it later when I put it on the podcast and when I put it on YouTube.
Right.
However, I rarely do. Like I cut the beginning because we just like, and then I cut the end because the same. But yes, I'd leave the same, right? So, and I think that's important, man. People see you. Plus, when I started at the beginning, right? I was nervous. And I was like, oh man, what's going to happen? What people are going to think of me? And then I was like, dude, man, I think my first 5 interviews, even though the guys that I had on were absolutely like, I had a couple of millionaires on my first 5 shows, which was insane, right?
Yeah, right.
It was all crickets. There was nobody listening to my stuff anyway. So then I was like, man, what am I worried about? Right.
Right. Yes. Right.
And now, so it's like, dude, man, now it's popping off. Now that I started my podcast, I'm starting to reach closer to 2,000 plays so far in like 4 or 5 months, which is cool. So now I know, like, okay, there's actually people listening to me.
Well, You know what's funny about that too, though, is that now that I notice, like even people in my own world, I remember I mentioned this in episode 3 too as well, where I'm sitting there at my daughter's, something going on at her school, and one of the dads comes up to me, he's like, "Hey man, just so you know, I was listening to your podcast. No offense, I fell asleep during it," like that. I'm like, you know what? As long as you're listening, like that's cool. Like, I'm good. Like you're actually listening. Like holy crap! But then like my brother's listening down in Georgia, my father, my like all these like people, like my wife says, like, "Oh yeah, I just listened to the last 2 episodes," and I'm like, holy crap! Like people are actually like they listen to me more now on the podcast than they do like in real life, right? Like, oh, this podcast is not so bad. Now I know how to get my wife to listen to me. I'm just going to continue to do more podcasts.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, talk about repurposing. She's like, "Hey, what's going on with Follow Up Fuel?" I'm like, "Didn't you hear the last episode? Go listen to it."
I love that. Yep, start having a conversation with your wife just on podcast. That's awesome, man. That's great. So, man, in regards to Follow Up Fuel, what you mentioned, like you got lots of copywriters to write it in. You mentioned like I'm not a good copywriter. So, what's been your approach in regards to, and especially of course you did the OFA challenge, which is absolutely amazing. What is now your business strategy to make sure that Follow Up Fuel pops off in a certain way that you can achieve your vision for your life?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's I was talking to somebody earlier about an hour or so ago about how now I'm in that sort of iterative process, right, of the LAID, where I learned how to put it all together and figure it all out, right? And now that it's out there in the world, right? And it's been a long sort of trajectory. And so this is literally like the 4th iteration of the technology, let's just say, in the user interface and all that stuff, right? But the development side is over. Although I say that, and there's still some tweaks we need to make. But the point is that how do I get this momentum? How do I get it out there? So the short story is that we had an initial launch with some people that I went into business with that I'm not in business with now, but we ended up acquiring 2,000 people, 2,000 customers really quickly through a JV affiliate strategy, right? Within about 5.5 days, we did about $100,000. That was great. And then I separated from them immediately and then opened up this version now called Follow Up Fuel, where about several hundred people purchased Follow Up Fuel a couple years ago. And then I realized that I wanted to make it even better, right? But I wasn't really sure how to make it better. So I got stuck for a while, just literally stuck. I ended up hiring a UX guy, and a UX UI guy, user interface, user design, to say, hey, I have this problem. Can you fix it? He fixed it within about a week. And then I hired another developer. And over the last 6 or 7 months, we figured all that out. And so I re-released it to the people that had previously purchased Follow Up Fuel to about a couple hundred people, right? So I have a couple hundred users right now using Follow Up Fuel who had already purchased lifetime access. And then I had a soft launch a couple weeks ago where I sold it to, I think I've sold like about 8 licenses. I think there was like 8 licenses and 1 refund at that point, right? Which is going to happen. Right. So now to answer your question, it's about how am I going to go forward? So I started off by buying solo ads. I found a great solo ads vendor through someone who I know, like, and trust through one of the Facebook groups. And he's done a great job. We were getting about 40% opt-ins. Actually, it was low at first because I had something that I needed to tweak on the landing page. He actually helped me tweak that. So I literally jumped from like 20% opt-ins to 40% opt-ins. And now I'm at a point now where I'm just trying to figure out where the right price point is. As a matter of fact, I went back and forth with my developer like for a couple of hours today, talking about switching from the lifetime one-time price to a monthly model to make it more to make it more affordable for people up front, and for me to actually acquire more customers, right? Because right now the model is it's $197 for life, and I'm thinking of we're in the process right now of switching it to a monthly payment. I'm not quite sure what it is, so I don't want to say that necessarily on the podcast until I definitely know for sure. And then once I figure that out, then I say, okay, cool. So now we have the price point for now it's about, okay, who are we going to be targeting specifically? So the solo ads that I got about 150 new leads from those solo ads, right? And they're from a specific niche, which is the make money online niche, right? So it's like, do I want to stay in that niche? Is this the right niche for Follow Up Fuel? Because it's funny, like as I'm thinking about this, there's so many different applications. I think, speaking of web applications, there's so many different applications for Follow Up Fuel. And so I was at a local Whole Foods a couple of weeks ago, and I ran into my painter, the guy that painted my house, and I have a couple of rental properties. And I showed him follow-up fuel, and he said, hey, he's like, why don't you, he's like, you should sell this to not necessarily the people that are just online, because, you know, people like me who are web savvy, who really can't write these emails,
Yeah.
but really need to write these follow-up emails to sort of get people that are on our email list, and, you know, they don't do anything with them. So right now, that's what I'm trying to figure out is do I want to continue to sell to and target people who are, let's say, making money online? It could be any number of different things. That's like a broad category, but it could be like people like me who are selling information like courses or membership sites and niche sites or affiliate marketers and those types of people. Or do I want to take it more offline and focus on, like, for instance, I was talking to a real estate agent who is a user of Follow Up Fuel recently. I was asking him to give me insight in terms of how he's using it and those types of things. It's actually a company that I saw online the other day called Follow Up Boss. Like, Follow Up Boss is basically a web application for real estate agents, right? It doesn't do what Follow Up Fuel does. It's not like an email sequence thing, but it's something different. I'm like, maybe that's a company that I can partner with. So I think, to answer your question more fully, it's about continuing to buy the ads through the solo ads vendor to begin with. Maybe shift lanes and start looking at other industries. And if I do that, then I'm going to start doing more traditional, probably Facebook ad buying and Google ad buying, I think. And then also I'll put it through some affiliates as well, whether it be on ClickBank or something, where I can try to get, again, that's again more for the make money on online space, and then just see. And then I figure once I know what my what the metrics are, the success metrics, to say like, okay, it costs this much to get a click, this much to get a lead, this much to get a customer. You know, this is how much money I spent overall to acquire, and this is what the overall value of each customer is. Then I'll say, okay, cool. Now I can double down and focus on this particular market or this particular channel, and really go hard at it, right? And for me, I think the ultimate goal is to get Follow Up Fuel to a point where it's not not necessarily replacing the current income that I have now from my current business, my recruiting business, but at least to get it to a point where I know that it is more predictable and scalable. Because that to me would be like, okay, I've got this. Because once I see what the success ratios are, I have no problem spending the money in order to grow it to whatever it needs to, wherever it can get to, you know.
Exactly. Nice, man. I like that. You got a clear path to go in forward and crush it. So that's absolutely amazing. Going from that, right? You're a full-time dadpreneur, man. Share with us, what is your thought, your view, your philosophy, or what do you feel when you hear the word dadpreneur? What does that mean for you?
It brings a smile to my face, to be honest with you, because you know, and I say this on my podcast as well. It's like in the very, very beginning, you hear me say, you know, what I'm learning in internet marketing every day is applicable to raising a family, right? It's what I call going from being a D.O to a D.A.D, right? And it's true. So you know, when you say dadpreneur, it's like, man, like that's the perfect word, right? Because I feel like when I'm because I am an entrepreneur and because I'm running my own business, it also allows me to spend a lot of time with my kids, which I do. Like I said, it's Jalen's birthday tomorrow, and my wife is asking me like, okay, you know, what are you gonna do for him? Like, with my daughter, when she turned 5, I took her out of, I picked her up from school early. She was in aftercare for a while, but I picked her up from school early, and we just went and got ice cream. Right, for the day, it was just us. It was like one-on-one, like me and my daughter, not like my wife, not my son, just, you know, just us, right? And so, do I do that with my son tomorrow? What am I going to do specifically for my son? But the fact of the matter is that I have that option. I'm able to do that. But I think what else, beside the, you know, the ability to spend more time with them, and, you know, if I, you know, like, and by the way, so I don't want to make it sound like that means I work 3 hours a day, because, for instance, on Saturday, I think it was, or Sunday morning, I left the house at left my house at like 5:30 in the morning to work. I just went to a hotel because they're always open and they have Wi-Fi, right? So that's where I go to be productive away from my house. Because I got home probably around like 9 o'clock or something to go to Jalen's soccer game. It might have been to swim class, right? Something like that, right? So I was working for that 4 hours. So when they go to bed, then I'll turn on the laptop and do more. But it's the lifestyle design that it enables me to do all those things. But I think more importantly, I want to be able to set the example for them as they, you know, start getting older and growing up and going through school and all that sort of stuff, that it doesn't necessarily have to be just one way. It doesn't have to be a linear thing where you're going to, go to high school, get good grades, go to a good college, and then go get a job somewhere, right? Like I want to be able to show them that, you can design your own life too as well. And by the way, one of the things that is talking about helping people. My daughter always reiterates that that's how you make money. You help people. But one of the other things too is that she knows that that daddy doesn't have a boss, right? And I because I tell her all the time, like, Daddy doesn't have a boss, so yes, I can do that. Yes, I'll be there. You know why I can do that, Jada? Because Daddy doesn't have a boss, right? And I want to keep hammering that away into her because I want her to think that way too as well. Now, if she has a boss when she grows up, great. But I want her to know that that it doesn't have to be that way. You can have it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you something else too. Actually, that speak just in terms of like understanding and learning all the stuff in marketing in terms of raising them. I don't know. Have you ever read the book or heard of the book? It's called Influence by Robert Cialdini.
No.
You should check it out. Right, it's a fantastic book, and it's really about the weapons of influence that are at play every day. And it's not necessarily a marketing book. The crazy thing is it's almost like an anti-marketing book. It's almost like the author who's a I think it's a PhD in psychology, but almost wrote it in a way to protect or to insulate consumers from marketers, right?
Oh, nice.
Because there's so many different ways that marketers influence people. But you talk about the weapons of influence. I think there's either like 6 or 7 weapons of influence, and I'm not going to get them all right now, so I won't even try. But one particular sort of element of one of the weapons is just saying something like "because" after you make a statement, right? So it's like if I say to my daughter or my son, I say, "Can you clean up your toys because I don't want to step on them and break them as I'm going through the living room, as I'm going through your toy room or something like that," right? And just by saying that little word "because," it sort of changes the way that they sort of behave and the way that they think. And that's true in marketing. And so when I learned that from listening to Robert Cialdini in that book, I immediately applied it to them, and I noticed that it worked. The other thing too is like we have Friday donuts, right? Like somehow because there was a donut place next to my daughter's daycare. It was like a few years ago, and so she wants to get donuts. I'm like, no, Jada, we can't get donuts today. And I'm like, how about Friday we get donuts? So ever since then, it's been Friday Donut Day. And one of the things that I learned in the book, and he talks about sort of successful children, like raising successful children. They did a study where there are children that were told, like they gave them like 2 cookies or a chocolate chip cookie in front of them. I said, all right, you can have this cookie now. You can eat this cookie now, or if you wait 20 minutes, you can have 4 more cookies, right? And the children that waited the 20 minutes versus the children that ate the cookie right away grew up, and I forget exactly the metric they used, but made less money, less successful, less happy. I think it was something like that. And so when we get Friday donuts, what I do is I buy the donuts, I give them each in a separate bag. Jada gets hers, Jalen gets his. We get back in the car. I give them the bags, right? And I say, listen, don't eat those donuts. You cannot eat those donuts until after dinner. Now, I don't put it like in the same context as the cookie people where you're going to get 4 more donuts or 5 more donuts, because I really don't want them to have the donuts really at all, frankly. But I'll say to them, I'm like, you can't eat those until you are done with your dinner, right? And you have to eat all your dinner. And what I'm doing, and again, this is just from straight out of that book, right? Which again, you talk about marketing and raising a family, is I was testing them. I wanted to see, okay, how good of a job have I done so far? And if I haven't, then I need to catch up, make sure that I'm doing a good job to make sure that they are sort of being reserved and disciplined. And frankly, they've never reached in the bag. They've always, they wait until after dinner, which I think is really, really great. So anyways, that's sort of the whole dadpreneur meld coming together,
Nice, man. I love it. Once you said Influenced by Robert Cialdini, I said, no, I actually read that book.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I actually read it twice.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. It's funny because I was going to go back and listen to it again too as well. I always listen. I'm listening in Audible a lot. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I should try and get the audio for that one. So, because if I need to read it first and take my notes. Yeah. And then I love to listen to it, because then the small details that you didn't pick up reading it, they unconsciously come in your head. I can't listen to it first, right? It doesn't stick in my brain. It just doesn't. Nothing sticks. It's like 8 hours to a book, and people are like, "I read a book." dude, I listened for 8 hours. I have no idea what they're talking about.
I'm such a horrible reader. I'm I'm better, but I feel like I'm so slow that I just need to. I need to read, I'm voracious. Like I want to learn so much. And I'm like, even podcasts. I'll listen to podcasts on like 1.5 speed sometimes because I'm like, all right, I want the information. I want the information. I'm the same thing with the book too as well. And then I'll go back, like for instance, even like .com secrets or expert secrets, and I'll go back and say, all right, I listened to it. Now I'm gonna like go back and sort of mark stuff and all that stuff.
Yeah, I absolutely. All right, man. We had a hard stop, so I still got tons of questions, and I'm sure that other dadpreneurs out there that have been listening, they got more questions. They want to know you. What's the best way to follow you, get in contact with you? I'll share it again for the people, just so you know. In the comment section, you can click on the link. You can find his podcast, right? You can find Jason's podcast and check it out. So that's one. What other ways are there to stay in contact with you?
My email is jason@followupfuel.com, so you can reach out there. On Instagram, you can reach me at Jason Webb 71. That's my business page. You can reach me there, Jason Webb 71, and you can connect with me on Facebook too as well. And actually, you can join the follow. I have a group, Follow Up Fuel group. I don't know what the link is, but they can certainly just search Follow Up Fuel. Follow Up
Fuel, and is that a group for your paid customers, or is that just an all access?
It's just general. Yep, it's just general.
Okay, good.
And also, of course, they can go to followupfuel.com to check out the website.
Oh, all right, cool. Yeah, I'll just make sure that that's for the people that are listening to the replay. That will be in the comments section or in the description section as well. Yeah. Followupfuel.com. Excellent, man. I love it. Great. So again, thank you so much for being on. Everybody else, I really appreciate you guys. And just like earlier today, I'm going to remind everybody, if there is a golden nugget that you just took from Jason here, and you're like, man, that I didn't think of it that way, or that's going to really, that's awesome. Don't only think that. But Jason already mentioned throughout our interview, it's like, I took action right away. I got something, I took action, I ran with it, right? Might be that you run the wrong direction, but you're running and you're taking action, and that's what makes us grow and become fearless fathers.
There you go. That's right.
All right, people. Have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.
Are you still meeting up with your friends now that you're a father? Kids making you stress out. You got no time for yourself to work out, read, or relax. Can you still remember the time you were hanging out with your friends, feeling energetic, happy, and confident? Spending time together and talking about your life and your crazy dreams. You're feeling alone now, don't you? No one to share your challenges with, and you're just running around from one storm into the next. Well, it's time to change this now. Join me and the Brotherhood of Fearless Fathers to speak on a weekly basis with like-minded dads to crush your challenges, face your fears with determination, be held accountable, and regain control of your life. If you want to become the hero your family needs you to be, then go to becomeafearlessfather.com/brotherhood. I'm looking forward to seeing you on one of our next calls.